Fortress among the stars. The void between stars held no comfort for Captain Elara Reeves. She stood motionless before the observation deck's massive viewport, watching the last glimpse of Sol fade into the cosmic background. Behind her, the military colony ship Aegis hummed with restrained power, carrying 5,000 souls, soldiers, scientists, engineers, and their families, toward humanity's most ambitious and desperate gamble. Final transition complete, Captain, reported Commander Kai Yamato, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. We've successfully engaged the Alcubierre drive. Estimated arrival at Kepler 186f in 14 months. Elara nodded, her reflection in the reinforced glass showing no emotion. At 42, she'd spent half her life in Earth's interstellar defense force, rising through the ranks as humanity expanded throughout the solar system. But this mission was different. Not exploration, not scientific discovery, but a military advance into contested space. Status of the colonists, she asked, turning from the viewport. 4,732 in cryosleep. Technical crew of 268, maintaining rotation shifts. All systems nominal. Yamato handed her a datapad with the latest diagnostics. General Zhao is requesting your presence in the war room. New intelligence from the Arcturus intercepts. The Arcturus intercepts. 3 words that had changed humanity's trajectory among the stars. 8 years ago, Earth's most distant listening post had detected transmissions from the Arcturus system, unmistakably artificial and undeniably hostile. The messages weren't directed at humanity, but spoke of resource acquisition, territorial expansion, and most concerning, the cataloging of potential cultivation worlds in nearby systems, including humanity's home. In the Aegis's war room, General Wei Zhao stood surrounded by holographic stellar maps. At 70, his face bore the weathered look of someone who had spent decades making decisions that cost lives. Besides him stood Dr. Amara Okafor, the mission's chief xenobiologist, her fingers manipulating data streams with practiced precision. Captain, Zhao acknowledged as Elara entered. Dr. Okafor has completed her analysis of the latest transmission patterns. Amara didn't look up from her work. The activity has increased by 43% in the last solar month. Their communications now specifically reference Kepler 186f, though they use a different designation. They're calling it Feeding Ground 7, Zhao added grimly. Elara studied the visual representation of the alien communications, pulsing patterns of light and color that Earth's AI translators had spent years deciphering. And we're still certain they haven't detected our approach, she asked. As certain as we can be, Amara replied. The Alcubierre bubble masks our electromagnetic signature, and we're following a trajectory that keeps the bulk of the Arcturus system between us and their main fleet concentration. General Zhao expanded a portion of the star map. The United Earth Council was divided on this mission, Captain. Half believed we should hide, fortify Sol, and pray these xenovores pass us by. The other half recognized that humanity has never survived by cowering. So instead we're building a fortress on their doorstep, Elara said. Not just a fortress, Amara corrected. A statement. Humans have claimed this world, and we will defend it. The following months passed in the controlled rhythm of deep space travel. Elara split her time between administrative duties, tactical planning with Zhao's staff, and personal research into the xenovores, the name Earth had given the mysterious species based on their apparent consumption-focused expansion pattern. In her private quarters, Elara reviewed personal logs from her crew, a practice she maintained to understand the psychological state of those conscious during the journey. Most were coping well, but the weight of their mission created an undercurrent of tension. They weren't just traveling to establish humanity's first interstellar colony. They were deliberately placing themselves in the path of a potentially overwhelming alien force. The Aegis carried Earth's most advanced military technology. Adaptive shield systems, quantum-entangled communications arrays that would maintain instantaneous contact with Sol, and prototype weapons designed specifically to counter what little was known of xenovore technology. But their greatest advantage, Ilara knew, lay in the human capacity for adaptation and innovation. "Captain, to the bridge," came the urgent announcement over the ship's comms. "Unknown contact detected." Ilara was moving before the message finished, taking lift shafts and corridors at a controlled run. The bridge hummed with focused activity as she arrived. Crew members at their stations with the practiced discipline of military personnel facing a potential threat. "Report," she ordered, taking her command chair. Long-range sensors detected an artificial structure in orbit around Kepler 186f, reported Lieutenant Rivera, the sensor officer. "It wasn't there in our last observation sweep 12 hours ago." The main view screen showed a grainy image of a sleek, asymmetrical object hanging above the blue-green world that was to be humanity's forward base. As enhancement algorithms sharpened the image, its alien nature became unmistakable. Organic curves melded with crystalline structures in a design philosophy utterly foreign to human aesthetics. "Xenovore?" asked Ilara. "Consistent with the architectural elements observed in the Arcturus transmissions," confirmed Amara, who had arrived moments after Ilara. "It appears to be an automated survey platform, their equivalent of a probe." General Zhao's expression darkened. "They're preparing the feeding ground." Ilara studied the alien construct. "Can it detect us?" "Not yet," Rivera answered. "We're still outside its likely sensor range, and the Alcubierre field continues to mask our approach." "Options." Ilara looked to her senior staff. "We could divert to another system," suggested Commander Yamato, though his tone made clear he didn't favor the idea. "And abandon the only habitable world we've confirmed within reach," countered Zhao. "Not to mention losing years of preparation and planning." Amara tapped her datapad. "The probe's positioning suggests it's conducting preliminary environmental sampling, standard procedure before a species decides to commit resources to a world." Ilara made her decision. "We proceed as planned, but accelerate our timeline. Prepare a strike team to neutralize that probe the moment we drop out of the Alcubierre field. I want it disabled with minimal damage. Dr. Okafor's team will need an intact specimen to study." She turned to her communications officer. "And prepare a tight-beam quantum transmission to Earth. They need to know the xenovores have reached Kepler 186f ahead of schedule." The next 72 hours transformed the Aegis from a transport vessel into a warship. Weapons systems were brought to full readiness. Tactical teams rehearsed boarding operations against the alien probe, and the colonial prefabrication units were reconfigured for accelerated deployment. When the Aegis finally decelerated into normal space, it did so with military precision. Before the xenovore probe could react, a team led by Major Dante Cruz had launched in a stealth shuttle, their approach masked by the electromagnetic disruption of the Alcubierre field collapse. "Team is away," reported Yamato, tracking the shuttle's progress. "ETA to target 3 minutes, 17 seconds. The bridge fell silent as the operation unfolded. On a secondary screen, helmet cameras showed Cruz's team approaching the alien construct, its surface shimmering with what appeared to be a form of energy shielding. "Deploying EMP device," came Cruz's voice over the comm. A moment later, a pulse of energy washed over the probe, and its external systems flickered and died. "Shield down," reported one of Cruz's specialists. Proceeding with physical attachment of restraint devices, the team worked with practiced efficiency, attaching specialized clamps and tethers to the now dormant probe. 27 minutes after deployment, Cruz's voice returned. "Package secured, Captain. Returning to Aegis." Only after the shuttle had docked and the probe was safely contained in a specialized holding bay did Ilara allow herself a moment of satisfaction. First contact had been made. Admittedly, an aggressive one. But humanity had drawn first blood in what might become an interspecies war. The colonization of Kepler 186f, renamed Nova Terra by the United Earth Council, though most colonists simply called it Nova, proceeded with military efficiency. Landing zones were secured, perimeter defenses established, and the prefabricated colonial structures deployed in a defensive formation that would serve as the foundation for humanity's first interstellar outpost. Within days, the first disturbing discovery was made. Xenovore biological material was found in Nova's soil and water, microscopic organisms that appeared to be terraforming the planet at a cellular level, preparing it for their specific environmental needs. In the colony's rapidly assembled laboratory complex, Dr. Okafor presented her findings to Ilara and General Zhao. They're essentially seeding the planet with biological precursors, she explained, gesturing to the microscopic structures displayed on her workstation. Given enough time, these organisms would transform Nova's ecosystem to match Xenovore biological requirements, likely making it toxic to human life in the process. How long would this process take? Asked Zhao. Without intervention, perhaps 30 to 40 Earth years. With active management by Xenovore colonists, potentially as little as a decade. Ilara studied the alien microorganisms and our countermeasures. Amara allowed herself a small smile. That's where humanity's adaptability comes into play. We've already modified our agricultural bacteria to specifically target and neutralize these precursors. Every field we plant becomes a battleground where our design microbes fight theirs. And ours are winning. The following months established a pattern that would define life in humanity's first interstellar colony. By day, colonists built their new home, constructing habitats, establishing farms, and integrating with Nova's largely compatible ecosystem. By night, they reinforced defenses, watching the skies for the inevitable Xenovore response to their missing probe. When that response came, it was not the overwhelming force they had feared, but a single ship, larger than the Aegis, but clearly not a warship. It entered Nova's system cautiously, maintaining distance as it conducted scans. They're confused, Zhao concluded during an emergency council meeting. The probe went silent, but they're detecting unexpected changes to their biological precursors. They've sent an investigative team, not a military response. Yet, added Ilara, we should assume their full military response is being organized. This gives us time, but not much. The colony's military contingent prepared for potential conflict while scientists continued studying the captured probe and the biological samples. What they discovered would change the course of the colony's development. Dr. Okafor burst into Ilara's office 6 months after landing, her usual composure replaced by barely contained excitement. We've cracked it, she announced without preamble. The Xenovore biological system. It's not just terraforming. It's communication. Communication. Ilara set aside the defense reports she'd been reviewing. The microorganisms create a biological network, a planet-wide system that would allow the Xenovores to sense and influence their environment at a fundamental level. Amara placed her datapad on Ilara's desk, displaying complex molecular structures. But here's the incredible part. Our counter-agents have begun to adapt. They're not just fighting the Xenovore biologicals, they're incorporating aspects of their structure. Is that dangerous? Asked Ilara, immediately concerned. Just the opposite. The human colonists exposed to these hybrid microbes are showing enhanced sensory capabilities. Subtle changes, but measurable. Increased environmental awareness, faster reaction times, enhanced pattern recognition. Amara could barely contain her excitement. Captain, we're adapting to this world at an accelerated rate. In fighting the Xenovore biological system, we're unconsciously creating our own version of it. As Nova's first year passed, the colonists began noticing the changes themselves. Children born on Nova developed even more pronounced adaptations, subtle physiological changes that enhanced their connection to the world around them. The colony's military personnel demonstrated improved tactical coordination during exercises, as if sharing information at a level below conscious awareness. The Xenovore observation vessel maintained its distant position, occasionally launching small probes that were either captured or destroyed by Nova's increasingly sophisticated defense network. Earth, informed of the developments through quantum communications, accelerated its shipbuilding program, preparing to reinforce humanity's precarious foothold among the stars. On the anniversary of their landing, Ilara stood on the roof of the colonial headquarters, now a fortified command center embedded in a growing settlement. Nova's sun cast a reddish glow across the landscape as it set, illuminating fields of earth crops interspersed with native vegetation that had been carefully tested and incorporated into the colony's ecosystem. Commander Yamato joined her, offering a cup of coffee, real coffee, grown in Nova's soil. "Not bad," Ilara commented after taking a sip. "Different, but good different. Like everything here," Yamato replied. "The engineers are saying the new sensor array will be online next week. It'll extend our early warning capability to the system's edge." Ilara nodded, looking toward the defensive perimeter where construction never ceased. "Do you think we'll be ready when they come in force?" Yamato considered the question. "A year ago, I would have said our chances were slim. Now," he gestured toward a group of children playing in a nearby field, their movements displaying the preternatural awareness that had become common among Nova's youngest residents. "I think humanity has found its edge, Captain. We didn't just bring a fortress to the stars. We're becoming something new here, something stronger." As if in response to his words, alarms began to sound throughout the colony. Ilara's communicator activated. "Captain, multiple transition signatures detected at the system's edge. Large-scale xenovore fleet formation confirmed." Ilara and Yamato exchanged a look that communicated more than words could convey. The real test of humanity's first interstellar colony was about to begin. The reckoning. 5 years after the establishment of Nova Bastion, the colony had evolved in ways no one on Earth could have predicted. What began as a military outpost had transformed into a thriving settlement of nearly 12,000 people, the original colonists supplemented by 3 waves of reinforcements from Earth, each bringing more advanced technology and fresh personnel to the increasingly significant frontier. Major Lyra Chen, born Lyra Martinez before her marriage to the colony's chief systems engineer, James Chen, walked the perimeter wall during her morning inspection. At 34, she'd spent her entire adult life in Earth's military, but the past 5 years on Nova had changed her in ways both subtle and profound. "Status report," she asked the young lieutenant accompanying her. "All defense grids at optimal capacity, ma'am," replied Lieutenant Emeka Okonkwo, his dark eyes scanning the horizon with the enhanced perception common to those born on Nova. "The biologicals detect no anomalies within the security zone." The biologicals had become a fundamental aspect of Nova's defense system. The hybrid microorganisms, part Earth bacteria, part adapted xenovore terraforming agents, had formed a symbiotic relationship with both the colonists and Nova's native ecosystem, creating what scientists called a biologically integrated security network. Through careful cultivation, the colony's military and scientific divisions had learned to interpret the subtle changes in these organisms, providing an early warning system that no technological sensor could match. "And our friends up there?" Lyra looked skyward, though the xenovore blockade fleet wasn't visible to the naked eye. "Maintaining standard orbital patterns. No change in communication frequencies or energy signatures in the past 72 hours. The standoff had become routine. After the initial xenovore battle fleet arrived, they had established orbital positions around Nova, but made no immediate move to attack. Instead, they maintained a blockade, occasionally engaging in probing actions that tested the colony's defenses while seemingly gathering information. Earth forces had responded by establishing their own military presence in the system, creating a delicate balance of power that had held for nearly 4 years. Lyra completed her inspection and headed toward the colony's central command complex, a structure that had evolved from the original prefabricated units into an impressive fortress partially embedded in Nova's bedrock. Inside, the Strategic Operations Center hummed with activity as personnel monitored both the xenovore blockade and the ongoing development of Nova's defensive capabilities. Major Chen, acknowledged General Ilara Reeves, promoted after the successful defense of the colony during the Xenovores' first and only major assault attempt 3 years prior. You're just in time for Dr. Okafor's presentation. Amara Okafor, now head of NOVA's Xenobiology Division, stood before a holographic display showing complex molecular structures. At 52, her hair had begun showing streaks of gray, but her eyes retained the sharp intensity that had made her one of Earth's foremost experts in alien biology. As you can see, she was saying as Lyra took her seat, the adaptive response continues to accelerate. Third-generation Nova-born children are displaying even more pronounced neurological integration with the biological network. The display shifted to show brain scans of several children born on Nova, comparing them to baseline human patterns from Earth. The enhanced neural clusters in the parietal lobe continue to develop, allowing for what we're now classifying as limited environmental perception beyond standard human senses. Amara manipulated the display to highlight specific brain regions. Most significantly, these adaptations appear to be responses to specific xenovore biological signatures. Our physiology is essentially developing countermeasures at a cellular level. Is there any cause for concern? Asked Commander Kai Yamato, who had remained Ilara's right hand throughout the colony's development. Quite the opposite, replied Dr. Okafor. These adaptations are providing significant advantages without compromising human genetic stability. The children remain fundamentally human, just humans better equipped for life on Nova and interaction with xenovore biologicals. Ilara studied the data with the critical eye of someone responsible for humanity's most remote outpost and the military applications. Amara nodded to Major Chen, who stood and took control of the display. We've integrated the biological network into our tactical systems, Lyra explained, bringing up schematics of Nova's defensive infrastructure. Our weapons platforms now incorporate living components that can detect and respond to xenovore technology with unprecedented accuracy. The biological shielding we've developed has proven 93% effective against their energy weapons during our last engagement. James Chen, Lyra's husband, and the colony's lead systems architect, added, "We're no longer just fighting the xenovores with technology. We're using their own biological principles against them, but with a uniquely human approach." The briefing continued with updates on colonist adaptations, defensive preparations, and intelligence gathered from captured xenovore probes. Throughout, Ilara noted the confidence in her staff, not the bravado of inexperienced soldiers, but the measured assurance of a community that had faced extinction and emerged stronger. Later that evening, Ilara stood on the observation platform of the command tower, watching Nova's twin moons rise above the colony's eastern perimeter. Behind her, the door hissed open as Amara joined her. "They're afraid of us," Amara said without preamble. "I've completed the analysis of their recent communication patterns. The xenovores aren't merely cautious. They're genuinely fearful of what we're becoming." Ilara turned, expression questioning. "Explain." "Their biological approach to colonization has always followed a predictable pattern. Seed a world, allow their microorganisms to transform the environment, then move in once the transformation is complete." Amara leaned against the railing. What they never encountered before is a species that could not only resist the transformation, but adapt it and turn it back on them. We've disrupted their fundamental understanding of interspecies competition. So why maintain the blockade? Why not cut their losses and move on to easier feeding grounds? Because we represent an existential threat. Amara's voice grew solemn. If our adaptations continue, if we master their biological principles and improve upon them, we could potentially counter their entire expansion strategy. From their perspective, humanity must be contained here, on this single world, before we can spread our resistance to other systems. The strategic implications weren't lost on Ilara. What had begun as a desperate attempt to establish a forward military base had evolved into something far more significant. Nova wasn't just humanity's first interstellar colony. It had become the front line in an evolutionary arms race. The Earth Council needs to understand this Ilara said finally. This isn't just about holding Nova anymore. It's about the future of human expansion among the stars. The quantum communication array transmitted Ilara's report to Earth that night, detailing both the colony's remarkable adaptations and the new understanding of the xenovore threat. The response came 12 hours later. Earth was accelerating its military shipbuilding program and preparing for a major offensive to break the blockade around Nova. In the meantime, the colony was to continue developing its unique defensive capabilities and prepare for the possibility of a full-scale xenovore assault before reinforcements could arrive. The warning proved prescient. 3 days later, Nova's biological early warning system detected subtle changes in the environment. Shifts in microbial activity that indicated xenovore biological agents had been deployed in new concentrations around the colony perimeter. They're preparing for something, Lyra reported during an emergency council meeting. The biologicals are showing patterns consistent with pre-attack positioning. James Chen's team had been monitoring xenovore communication frequencies. We're detecting increased signal activity throughout their fleet. Energy signatures are rising across all vessels. Ilara didn't hesitate. Initiate Defense Protocol Alpha. All non-essential personnel to shelters. Military divisions to assigned positions. She turned to Amara. Activate the biological countermeasure system. Full deployment. Throughout the colony, specialized dispensers released clouds of engineered microorganisms, humanity's biological answer to xenovore warfare. These microscopic allies would counter the alien biological agents while enhancing the colonists' connection to Nova's environment, particularly among military personnel. The attack began at dawn. Xenovore ships descended from orbit in formation, their organic metallic hulls gleaming in Nova's reddish morning light. They deployed in 3 distinct waves, orbital bombardment vessels hanging back while troop carriers and support craft approached the colony's outer defense perimeter. They're testing for weaknesses in our biological shield, observed Commander Yamato from the tactical center, watching as the first energy barrages from xenovore vessels were absorbed by the seemingly invisible barrier surrounding the colony, a barrier composed of energized particles maintained by the biological network. Focused point defense systems on their troop carriers, ordered Ilara. Priority targets are any vessels attempting to breach the perimeter for ground deployment. Nova's defense platforms responded with precision. Rail guns accelerated projectiles to hypersonic speeds, targeting the vulnerable junction points in xenovore ship design, weaknesses identified through years of studying captured technology. Electromagnetic pulse weapons disrupted the semi-organic control systems of the alien vessels, causing several to veer off course or lose power entirely. Despite the colony's formidable defenses, the xenovore numerical advantage was significant. Several troop carriers managed to breach the outer security zone, landing beyond the colony walls and deploying ground forces, the first time xenovore soldiers had been seen in person by most of Nova's defenders. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, the aliens moved with unsettling grace despite their bulky, exoskeleton-like exterior. Their bodies featured a combination of organic tissue and what appeared to be integrated technological components. The line between biology and technology blurred in their species far beyond humanity's most advanced cybernetics. All units maintain discipline. Lyra's voice came through tactical comms as she led the ground defense. Remember your training. Their biology is susceptible to our adapted weapons. Target connection points between their armor segments. The battle that followed demonstrated the remarkable evolution of Nova's military forces. Soldiers moved with unprecedented coordination, almost as if sharing a tactical awareness through the biological network. Their weapons, conventional firearms modified with biologically engineered ammunition, proved devastatingly effective against xenovore physiology, exploiting vulnerabilities identified through years of research. Most impressive was the performance of Nova's youngest defenders, the third-generation colonists who had grown up fully integrated with the biological network. Though none were old enough for combat roles, those serving in tactical communications and sensor monitoring positions displayed an intuitive understanding of xenovore movements and intentions that bordered on precognitive. "They're preparing to deploy their biological weapon," announced one such analyst, 19-year-old Elias Okafor, Dr. Amara's son. "I can feel the shift in their deployment pattern." Moments later, xenovore ships released clouds of microscopic agents designed to disrupt Nova's biological defenses, a countermeasure to humanity's countermeasure. But Elias and his team had anticipated this, directing the colony's biological response system to release a new generation of defensive microorganisms specifically designed to neutralize this threat. The battle raged for 27 hours, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. The xenovore's numerical superiority was balanced by the colonists' home field advantage and biological adaptations. Casualties mounted on both sides, with the Colonial Medical Center working at full capacity to treat the wounded. The turning point came not from a military breakthrough, but from an unexpected scientific revelation. In the midst of the battle, Dr. Okafor's team completed analysis of xenovore communication patterns captured during the engagement. "General," Amara's voice came through to Ilara's tactical headset. "We've decoded their primary command frequency. It's not just communication, it's control. Their ground forces receive continuous guidance from the command ships. If we disrupt that signal, they lose coordination," Ilara finished. "How quickly can you develop a countermeasure?" "We already have one. The biological network can generate an interfering pattern. We just need to amplify it through our communication array." Ilara gave the authorization, and within minutes, Nova's communication towers had been reconfigured to broadcast a signal that mimicked and distorted the xenovore command frequency. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the battlefield, xenovore ground forces suddenly hesitated, their movements becoming uncoordinated and erratic. Several combat units began withdrawing without apparent cause, while others stood motionless, as if awaiting instructions that never came. "Press the advantage," ordered Ilara. "All units, concentrate fire on disorganized enemy formations." The colony's forces surged forward, systematically eliminating the confused xenovore ground troops, while the defense platforms intensified their assault on the alien ships. Unable to effectively coordinate their forces, the xenovore commanders made the decision to retreat, pulling back remaining ground troops and withdrawing their fleet to a higher orbit. By the time Nova's second sunset painted the battlefield in crimson hues, the engagement had ended. The colony had suffered significant damage to its outer structures and lost 117 defenders, but the xenovore forces had been decisively repelled, with an estimated 30% of their attack force destroyed or disabled. In the aftermath, as recovery operations began and the wounded received treatment, Ilara convened her senior staff in the partially damaged command center. "Assessment?" she asked, her voice hoarse from 27 hours of continuous command. "The biological shield held at 82% capacity throughout the engagement," reported James Chen. "Structural damage is significant but repairable. Defense systems are at 64% and being restored." "Casualties?" Ilara directed her question to Dr. Maizong, the colony's chief medical officer. 117 confirmed dead, 342 wounded, 86 critically. Dr. Zhang's expression was solemn but composed. "The biological treatments are showing remarkable effectiveness. Many wounded are recovering at rates we wouldn't see on Earth." Lyra provided the military assessment. The xenovores lost approximately 30% of their committed forces. Their withdrawal was disorganized. They're regrouping in high orbit, but their formation suggests defensive positioning rather than preparation for another attack. Amara completed the briefing with the most significant news. "We've analyzed their communication patterns during the retreat. They're sending continuous updates to what we believe is their central command structure beyond this system. Based on our translation algorithms, they're describing humanity using a term that roughly corresponds to adaptive predator or evolving threat. Their primary concern appears to be our ability to counter their biological warfare." Ilara absorbed this information, considering its implications for both Nova and humanity's broader position in interstellar space. So we've changed their perception of us from simply intruders in Feeding Ground 7 to an existential threat. Yes, confirmed Amara. And there's more. The biological samples we've collected from fallen Xenovore soldiers show signs of attempted adaptation to our countermeasures. They're trying to evolve in response to us, but their process is slower, more deliberate. Our spontaneous adaptations appear to be outpacing theirs. The strategic implications were clear. What had begun as humanity's desperate attempt to establish a forward military base had transformed into something far more significant. Proof that humans could not only survive in contested space, but thrive, adapt, and potentially outcompete even advanced alien species. 3 days later, as repair efforts continued throughout the colony, the quantum communication array detected an incoming message from Earth. The combined forces of 3 Earth battle groups had departed Sol 2 months earlier, using the latest Alcubierre drive configurations to achieve faster transit times. They would reach Nova within 2 weeks, bringing enough firepower to potentially break the Xenovore blockade permanently. That evening, Ilara stood once again on the observation platform, surveying the colony that had grown from a military outpost into humanity's most remarkable achievement. Despite battle damage, lights shone across the settlement as repair crews worked through the night and families recovered from the ordeal. Above, Nova's twin moons illuminated the landscape, while the distant glimmer of Xenovore ships remained visible to enhanced perception as points of light against the star-filled sky. Commander Yamato joined her, as he often did during quiet moments. "Earth is calling this a triumph," he said. "The reports we sent back about the adaptations, the successful defense, the Council is already authorizing preparation for additional colonies. We've proven it can be done." Ilara nodded, watching a group of children playing in one of the colony's protected inner courtyards. Children who represented humanity's future among the stars. Their movements displayed the enhanced awareness and coordination that had become normal for Nova-born humans, a visible reminder of how quickly the species could adapt when necessary. "We didn't just build a fortress among the stars," she said finally. "We've started the next chapter of human evolution." She turned to face her oldest friend and most trusted officer. "And the Xenovores know it. That's why they fear us." "So what comes next?" asked Yamato. "After Earth forces arrive and the immediate threat is neutralized." Ilara's gaze returned to the stars. No longer distant points of light representing an unknown frontier, but potential homes for a humanity now proven capable of thriving even in hostile territory. "Expansion," she answered simply. "Not just military bases, but true colonies. Settlements where humans can grow, adapt, and evolve in response to new worlds and new challenges." She smiled slightly. The Xenovores thought they were fighting for a feeding ground. Instead, they'd helped create a species that may one day outgrow even their empire. In orbit above Nova, the Xenovore command ship continued its observation of the human colony. Its biological processing centers analyzed the data from the failed assault, calculating strategies and evolutionary responses that might counter the unexpected threat these adaptable newcomers presented. But deep in its semi-organic computational matrix, an unfamiliar response was forming, something the species had rarely experienced in its long history of consuming worlds: doubt. And on the planet below, humanity's first true interstellar colony continued its work, repairing, building, adapting, and preparing for a future among the stars that now seemed not just possible, but inevitable.